Increase our faith. Our gospel today begins with that plea of the apostles, and yet it is, I think, the universal plea of each and every one of us. We come here today because we have received this indescribably magnificent gift of faith. This very life in God that is offered to us in our baptism and the life of the church. In that faith, we know then that God is always with us. He continually strengthens us and guides us and leads us. He offers us constantly His mercy for the forgiveness of our sins. And yet in our human weakness, we can easily forget this, to be consumed by all of those problems and struggles and circumstances of our lives. And I think we're reminded of this in our first reading. The writer expresses the longing in our hearts of those difficulties that all of us have, and that call for the need of faith and strength. Lord, I cry for help. I only have misery and ruin. How does the Lord respond to that plea? He tells them, people through the prophet and all of us, to relax and to trust. The vision still has its time. It presses on to fulfillment and will not disappoint. You see, God has called each of us into being. He has given us that first gift of life. And our faith assures us that He will always provide for everything that we need. And that is meant to then give us this hope that always sustains us. Today, this first Sunday in October every year is Respect Life Sunday. And we reflect upon that first gift that all of us have received. We thank our parents in a most special way for their cooperation with God's plan in giving us life. We commend all the parents out who have given that life, that gift to their children. And yet we live in a world that has a mindset that is just the opposite of what the church teaches us. Children as this sublime gift of married life and married love. The mindset denies God's sovereignty over us and thinks life is disposable at our whim. We all know since the infamous Supreme Court decision of Roe versus Wade now 46 years ago, our nation has sanctioned the killing of the unborn child at the rate of over 1 million every year. It is an incomprehensible tragedy that our society sees the unborn child as something that can be eliminated. And then the unavoidable consequences of that have been a disregard for the sanctity and dignity of every human person, the increase in violence in our society, the growing disregard and disrespect for one another. And so in light of that, it's easy to lose faith and hope. But again, the words of our first reading are meant to strengthen us and console us that the vision, which is the very plan and will of God, that seeks always to give life, never to destroy it, does indeed press on to fulfillment, and it will not disappoint. Again, when we struggle to seek to preserve this sanctity of life, we can see that our efforts maybe do not seem to be successful, but we have to remember, as the apostles asked the Lord, increase our faith, that our faith and our hope is with all things. It's not something that we can do to develop in ourselves, but it's something God will do in us. St. Paul alludes to this in our second reading, writing to Timothy, that God does not give us a spirit of cowardice, but rather one of power and love. He has to give us everything we need to be faithful, and so we only and always depend on Him. It is this truth which is the most humbling and liberating for all of us, that we have to keep in mind that as we aspire always to do good and to avoid evil, our human weakness will always limit our efforts. But God's grace is always sufficient for us. And at the end, it is His grace that is the only thing that can give us any increase in faith and love. And then as we strive to serve Him, sometimes feebly, we will then come to know an indescribable joy that can only be found in our trust in God. And then after completing all those tasks that He has instructed to us here in this life, we might be like the wise and loyal followers described in our gospel today. The servant who knows the comfort and commendation of the master upon their return. And as we say with all gratitude and thanksgiving to God, we are only unprofitable servants. We have only done what we were obliged to do.